Hi, everyone. Welcome to our admissions tip event. I am so excited to see you guys here. And I'm excited to kind of get going. Just by way of introduction, my name is Mirto Lalakos, and I am a principal at VC Lab. And I want to start off by telling you a little bit about VC Lab and the parent company Desal Group. So, VC Lab is democratizing access to venture capital. And I'm actually going to pull up a few slides here because I think it's going to make it a little bit easier for everybody to follow. And everyone, you know, um, I want this to be an interactive event. So if you have any questions at any point, you can see on the right hand side here of the AirMeet platform, you're going to see there's a chat. So we recommend you to use the chat to start engaging with other people in this community who are also interested in new and emerging funds, potentially even launching their funds as we speak. And I want you to also use the Q&A section too, where you can ask questions for myself. What I'll do is I'll go through a little bit of a presentation and then I'll go through the Q&A and answer all of your guys' questions. Once we're done, we're going to turn it over to networking. So we're huge on community here at VC Lab and Desal Group, and there's so much that is being done through you guys forming connections, whether it's learning more about the program, deciding if this is the right thing for you, or getting mentorship or introductions from someone who you meet at these events. So we really, encourage you to stick around and start being part of this wonderful community that we've created. So use the chat, use the Q&A, and stick around for networking later. We're also, if you want to discuss your individual applications, by the way, we're going to have a table where a member of the team is going to be there to, answer any questions you have about your application. So without out of the way, let's get into it, everyone. So for anyone who is coming to one of our events for the first time, our mission, as I just said, is to democratize venture capital. So traditionally, we've seen that there is a very kind of homogenous group of people and locations in the world that control almost the majority of venture capital funding, right? And they've been, these funds, they've been really kind of shaping the landscape and the sector. And we're kind of at a turning point right now because we are making it easier and cheaper and less transparent to start a venture capital fund from wherever you are in the world. So geographical kind of access, but also demographic access too, right? So people from different backgrounds, different universities or races or color or, um, you know, academic kind of achievements can join venture capital and have their own firm. So we do this in a number of in a number of ways. Today we're going to cover one of them, which is the VC Lab kind of program, which is the flagship accelerator to launch a fund, probably in the world. So many of you would have, applied to the program before or interested in applying. And so this session is all about answering your questions, kind of giving you a lot of information about how you can create a winning application when you're applying to VC Lab, what kind of things do we look for, how you can make yourself stand out, what the requirements are. And then we're going to kind of, open it up to questions too. So VC Lab, we're on cohort 18. We've run 18 cohorts to date, which is huge. And if you haven't kind of been part of our community, I want to tell you this: every single cohort that we run, we change it, we adapt it, we iterate it based on the participants' feedback, based on the market condition. So right now we're kind of seeing, a bit of, LPs are a little bit hesitant right now. They're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. There's capital that's being pulled out of public markets. So it's a very particular time. And so, cohort 17, which is the cohort that's running at the moment, we have, adjusted the entire program to make sure that you can win in launching a fund in this particular time of history, right? And so with cohort 18, we're going to be doing the same. And by way of introduction to this new cohort too, there's obviously a lot of kind of things wrong in the world right now. both kind of on a societal level, but also on a kind of global and environmental level too. And so the theme of cohort 18 is creating a beautiful future. Okay. And so what we're going to be doing is that we're really going to do an open call for uh, managers who are launching funds in wellness, in government tech too. You're seeing this, we're experiencing firsthand the changes that are happening on a kind of geopolitical level as well. And we know that kind of how governments are run is drastically going to change going forward. And so there's already people, founders working on this. And so we want to support the VC funds who want to kind of shape the future of what kind of governments and citizen kind of participation looks like. So, yeah, so we're, looking to kind of really encourage people and managers who want to build funds to solve some of today's largest problems and want to shape a beautiful future for the world to apply to the program. So this doesn't mean that you necessarily need to be launching an impact fund, right? You just need to have this kind of ambition to not only kind of make returns through venture capital, but also do it in a way that's ethical and that's going to kind of create positive change in the world, whatever that may mean to you. So, I want to tell you a little bit about the VC Lab funnel. No, there's a lot of you kind of interested in launching VC funds at the moment. You're about to enter one of the probably most competitive spaces that you can as an entrepreneur, as someone launching their own business. So, as I said, VC Lab is probably the only kind of program of its kind in the world right now. And we are at a point in the organization where we're launching more than half of the entire world's new VC funds every year, which is crazy to think about it. So, we're kind of seeing, almost the entire kind of deal flow in this space. And so for every cohort, and we run about 4 cohorts a year, this is what the funnel has been looking like in the past couple of cohorts, right? So we get approximately 3,000 applications. Only 350 of those applications are ones which we deem have a chance at succeeding. So they're admitted into the program. And then out of those, because VC Lab is a closing program, so it's a progress based program. You're not here to learn, you're here to launch your fund and get to a close by the end of the 14 weeks on the program. Um, and if you're not keeping pace and you can't stay on the program too, only 150 of those 350 starting succeed, which is kind of a 5% success rate from the 3,000 that apply, which is insane if you think about it. So the admissions process is difficult. So today we're just kind of here to demystify that and give you a chance at succeeding. We don't want to make this, competitive. We want you to achieve. And so this session is all about just kind of helping you portray yourself in the best possible way in your application. So what does the application look like? The application you'll see, and let me share a link to the application in the chat right here. The application is very, very short. Some people can complete this in even 15 minutes. If you really want to kind of put a lot of effort into it, then you can maybe get this done in 60 minutes approximately, but it's not going to be any more than that. We want to make it super, super easy. And we've processed so many applications to date that we just from kind of taking a quick glance at the application, we know if you are someone who can succeed in this space or not. But just for the sake of kind of getting you up to speed here, we're going to be asking you some basic information like what's your name, where'd you live, what's your LinkedIn profile. We're going to ask you to tell us a little bit about your background, so kind of what you've done in the past. We will ask you what the thesis of the fund that you're looking to launch is, and we're going to go into this in a lot more detail coming up. And we're going to ask you what you are looking to get out of the program, as well as a 2-minute video where you are asked to tell us what is the fund that you're looking to set up and why you are uniquely qualified to set up this fund. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. It's literally just take your phone and then film yourself talking about it, or open a Zoom session that you record, download the link, put that in the application. It needs to be super, super easy. So don't be, in the slightest intimidated by the 2-minute video. This just kind of gives us a sense about, it's one thing to get a written application. It's another thing to see you in person, animated, talking about the things that you're excited about. So that's kind of what the video is for. So I want to kind of break these elements down a little bit and kind of pick out some of the most important ones that we look at in the application. And basically what happens is that, we take all this information and then we extract a few things. I'm going to go through these right now. The first one being the thesis. So we extract these things and then our admissions team, they score these elements on a 1 to 5 basis. So just so you kind of know what this looks like from our perspective as well. So let's talk a little bit about the thesis here. So the thesis, also, I see you guys are using the reaction emojis down at the bottom here. So can you put an emoji if you know what the thesis is or not? I just kind of want to get a sense of where the cohort is at. Okay. All right. So some background here. So we'll put a link in the chat here. Hi, Domenica. Domenica's from our team. She kind of runs all of these events in the background. So if we could put a link here on to kind of like more information on the thesis, that'd be great. But the thesis is basically, so if you have ever run a startup before, it's your value proposition, but for a fund. So it's a very kind of short and concise sentence in which you describe to the LP. So this is not your marketing slogan. It's not the slogan that you're going to put out to startups. It's going to be, and just like the value proposition is for kind of the customer, for the customer to understand what you're doing. The customer in VC is the LP. The customer is not the startup. The customer is not, anyone else. Your customer is the LP. So in that exact kind of philosophy, your thesis is kind of this value proposition for the limited partner. So you're the investors that are going to come into your fund. And you need to put in here the things that investors want to know about your fund. And so that is, what is the fund size? What are you going to be investing in? What sector? What stage of startups you're going to be in? So pre-seed, seed, Series A. Where you are located as the partner or, kind of the founding team of the fund, where you are going to be investing. So which kind of geography. So you may be located in San Francisco, and maybe you're investing in the whole of the US, right? So managers are based in San Francisco. We're investing in the US. That's our investment focus. And so that's kind of the front end of your thesis. It's kind of like, this is what defining what it is that you're investing in. And then in the back end of your thesis is your secret sauce. So that's where you want to outline why you are the best person to win in this space that you outlined in the front end of your thesis, right? So I'm going to give you an example here. So, Myrto Lalakos Ventures is launching a $10 million venture capital fund to invest in pre-seed startups in climate in the US, leveraging her angel investment track record, which has generated, a 20x markup on pre-seed climate tech startups in the past. So what have I done? I'm saying this is where I'm investing in. And my secret sauce is that I've been investing in these climate tech pre-seed startups in the US for a long time now. I'm already starting to see returns or kind of markups, which are probably going to lead to returns. And so this is what makes me a really good person to run this fund. And again, remember, this is kind of for the LP. And what the LP wants to know is, can you pick winners? So, you know, do you have deal flow? Out of this deal flow, can you see kind of clearly who the most successful startups are going to be? And then um, once you invest in them, maybe you have some type of secret sauce or ability to kind of help these companies grow and get to the next stage, or you're introducing them to the right investors and stuff like that. So, this is kind of how you want to think about the thesis. Something that we see a lot, and everyone, please do pay attention to this, is that with the thesis, people are kind of coming into venture capital and they're like, hmm, I really want to start investing in climate tech, so that's the front of the thesis. And my secret sauce is that I spent 10 years working in fintech and doing all these things in fintech, da 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 da. So it doesn't match, right? So if you're gonna be coming into venture capital, you need to have an edge. You need to kind of have been in the space. You need to demonstrate that you have access to really high quality deals here, that maybe you've invested in them in the past. Maybe you have created a very strong community of founders who are building companies in that same space that you're looking to start investing in, or that you're kind of an advisor, you're a board member in these types of companies and you've helped them to grow. So you need to kind of come in here and be specific. It's not, oh, I think this space is going to win. I'm going to launch a fund investing in AI because AI is going to do really well in the future. That is recipe for disaster. No LP is going to be interested in that, because why would they invest in you? They know AI is going to be the future. They know all of these kind of up and coming sectors are going to be the future. So why would they invest in someone who doesn't come from AI, who has no experience in AI, right? They're just going to go to the funds that have been in the space and that are, winning in the space and have a competitive edge in the space. So this is really important, everyone. I really want you to think about this. This alignment between yourself and your background and kind of the fund that you're looking to build. And before you kind of get disappointed here or anything like that, the thesis is where you're going to make 80% of your deals. Okay, so what you're doing as a new fund manager is that you're going to be launching a fund one, let's say that's $10 million, and the thesis, or whatever you outline in the thesis, so let's take my climate tech thesis example, is it's assumed by the LPs and by the stakeholders of the fund that 80% so 8 million out of the $10 million fund is going to be invested in these pre-seed climate tech startups in the US. But there's a 20% that you can kind of go off thesis a little bit and invest outside of the thesis. And so why is this important? It's important because if you want to start your own fund, you want to start with kind of a space that you are really strong in. But this is just for fund one. And then you have a 20% of the fund to invest in other spaces. So let's say you want to move from climate tech to kind of AI, and actually the end goal for you is to invest in AI. What you could do, set up a fund, do 80% of your deals in climate tech, and then do a 20% in AI and see how those perform. And if those deals perform really well, and actually your AI deals are doing much better than your climate tech deals, so obviously all the deals that investments that you make need to be high quality. You need to you have a fiduciary duty to make sure that all the deals that you make are likely to kind of return the whole fund. Um, but maybe what you're going to see is that this 20% in AI that you've done or in these other spaces are outperforming your climate tech investments. And so maybe in fund two, you want to start a AI dedicated fund. So that's kind of how you move from one sector to the other in venture capital. So hopefully that is clear. But once again, guys, do put your questions in the chat if you want to learn more about this. So that is thesis. All right. Next up, we're going to be looking at your background. So There's a few things that kind of go into here, but basically, as we've kind of described now, talking about the thesis, we are going to be looking at how relevant your background is to the thesis that you want to launch. So, we're going to be looking at whether we think that your background will give you an advantage in the space that you are kind of wanting to launch a fund in, what kind of notable things and achievements you have from your past. And we're kind of going to be looking at this from the perspective of an LP, right? So if I was kind of a limited partner looking to kind of uh, find a new manager to manage part of my wealth, if I kind of look at your background, like, is this someone who I'd want to work with, someone who kind of has that background that gives me a little bit of confidence that they're going to win in this space. Next up, we're going to talk about we're going to be looking at your network. So there's a few things here to there's a few things here to consider. Um, Obviously, from a venture capital perspective, there's two networks that are really important for you. The first one is the obvious one, which is your startup network, your, we also call that access to deals, or your kind of pipeline, for where you deploy capital. But that's kind of a network that, is kind of more important in the second phase of starting the fund. When you're launching a fund, the first thing that you're going to do is, and that you're going to need to prove, is that you can fundraise the fund. So when you're launching a VC fund, you won't start making investments until you've raised the fund. And VC Lab basically helps you raise the fund. And we go into so much detail on the process of how you kind of get going for that. But the basic thing to kind of know here is that as a new manager, you're going to be raising the fund from your first and second degree network. You're not going to be raising from institutional investors and fund of funds, and probably not even family offices for the first fund, um, or these like anchor LPs. That's not something that no, none of these types of LPs that I just outlined are going to be investing in your first time fund as a new manager who's never done this before, because it's already, just think about it, it's venture capital is one of the riskiest asset classes that there is, and LPs are very, very aware of that. And so you kind of going to some stranger or some kind of really established fund and being like, let me manage your capital, I've never done this before, is like tripling the amount of risk that they would have to take. And so this isn't going to work. And so you can't, that's not a route that you can take. The route that you're going to take is kind of like start unlocking LPs in your first and then second degree network, right? And so we're going to teach you how to do that, but you need to have some sort of initial network of high net worth individuals. And this could be people that you went to school with, people that you went to college with, people you played sports with, people you worked with or had an internship with. You know what I mean? Like, we're really, you're going to have to pitch thousands of LPs to close the first fund. And so you're going to see that you're going to have to go really deep into your network and into your past to find these limited partners. And we're going to help you do all of that in the program. But in your application, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to open your LinkedIn and we're going to look at the number of connections that you have. And we know that this isn't perfect, okay? Because you can have a whole huge amount of LinkedIn connections and not actually have a personal relationship with any of them. But it's kind of a proxy for us to understand whether you're well connected. And usually, if you have a high kind of LinkedIn following, you are very well connected. So we're just going to be looking at your number of connections, and we're going to be scoring it from 1 to 5 once again in terms of how large it is, right? And so if you've been inactive and also kind of in this new age, or like the present age of venture capital, and the venture ecosystem, everyone's very active on LinkedIn. That's where you're going to find a lot of the startups, and a lot of the community is very active on LinkedIn. So if you haven't, kind of spent a lot of time on your LinkedIn network, get on it now and just start adding all of your past connections. Go deep, as we said, into your network, and just anyone who you've met before, who you went to school with, who whatever, just start adding them to LinkedIn because that's going to help your application. Awesome. The last kind of thing here that we look at is two things, but we kind of look at it at the same time, uh, is the needs and the time. So let me kind of go through these one by one. So when we say needs, there's a question in your application where we're going to be asking you why you want to join the VC Lab program. So what are you looking to get from it, right? And so what we want to see here is, how much you've thought about what you need in order to move forward with a fund. um, and the other thing, for example, something we see a lot, and it's not going to help you in your application, is if you put in your application, a lot of people do this. It's like, oh, I want to come to VC Lab because I want to be introduced to limited partners. This is kind of like a common thing. If you put that, it doesn't mean that you won't get accepted, but it doesn't play in your favor, to put that, because VC Lab, by design, does not introduce you to limited partners. So let's go back to kind of what we were discussing here on your network and limited partners. You won't be able to raise this fund through people that don't know you or that we introduce you to. Um, you are going to raise this fund through people that you know and people that you're going to start developing really kind of solid relationships with because they're in your ecosystem, or because they're super interested in what you're doing, or because they're going to all the same events as you, or you know what I mean? And so by design, we can't, like, even if we make 100 introductions, none of these people are going to be investing in your fund. You need to kind of have the bedrock and the foundation to kind of in your existing network to start finding these LPs. The other thing is that as a new and later on emerging venture capital fund manager, is that you're going to be fundraising, and everyone wants to go into venture capital of the because you want to make deals and you want to invest in startups and you want to shape the future. But the reality is that you're going to be doing that for 50% of the time. The rest of the time you're going to be fundraising, okay? And so it's really, really important that you start to kind of really train this fundraising muscle. It's one of the hardest things that you're going to do, and fundraising is actually kind of what makes launching a VC fund so difficult. It's kind of the biggest barrier to entry. Um, but you're gonna need to develop that ability and that skill to fundraise. And VC Lab is helping, right? We're here to coach you. We're here to tell you all the tricks in the book that exist to kind of get you going. But think about it as if you're kind of learning how to sell. It's an art, it's a skill. You need to develop it over time. And the other reason why this is so important is because once you raise a first fund, and again, it's probably going to be through your first and second degree connections, you're gonna deploy the the fund or a part of the fund, and then you're gonna start fundraising for fund two, and suddenly you can start going to kind of these larger investors who can, start taking you a little bit more seriously, and you actually now have a track record. So if they want to conduct diligence, they can, because there's a fund that exists, right? In fund one, you can't even pass diligence with these folks. So you're on fund two, you're going to these more kind of serious and larger investors. Um, and they're actually going to be one of the things that they're going to diligence is, are you a manager that they think can continue to fundraise? So they're not only going to be looking at how good your track record is, they're also going to be looking at, can this person fundraise, right? Is am I If I go into this now $20 million fund, so it's kind of like a fund two type of size of fund, and I put 3 million, are they going to be able to close out the rest of the fund? Right. So fundraising is very important. And so, anyway, in the need section, we want to know kind of what you're looking to get from the program. Um, and if you say, I want to be connected to LPs, that's not really going to play in your favor. So tell us what you need. And then let's talk about time, which is another kind of key, section and element of your application. So here, what we're asking you is, and there's kind of like this conception that, oh, I'm being asked how much time I can dedicate to the program. The reality is that we're asking you how much time you have to build your fund per week. So it's going to be like, how much time do you have to dedicate to this every week? And the program, because of the way that it's set up, it's going to be taking you through and guiding you through every little and big thing that you need to do in order to get to a first close. And so the program doubles as your firm building. They're the same thing, right? Your firm building is the program. So tell us how much time you have available to do that. The more time that you have available, the better it is, because building a fund is just so difficult, and you're going to be, setting up all the kind of back end and stuff like that, and your deck, da, 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 but you're mainly going to be talking to a lot of people to see if there's any interest in the market to invest in your fund. And so the more time you have, the better. A lot of the very successful fund managers have been dedicating up to over 60 hours to their fund. It literally becomes their sole focus. But for getting started, you can manage it if you have kind of like minimum 15 hours per week to dedicate to this. And this is like absolute minimum. So if you can't even dedicate 15 hours to launching the fund, you're just not going to make it. And we don't want you to waste your time and kind of, get onboarded into the program and stuff. Like, we won't accept you because you're not going to make it. Remember the funnel, like the 3,000 to the 350 to the 150, you're just going to drop off the funnel like that, right? So make sure that you have a lot of time that you can dedicate to this. Again, if there's any questions about this, put it in the Q&A section. All right. And then this is kind of a very important thing I want to talk about here, which is the Mensarius Oath. So, the Mensarius Oath, for those of you who do not know about it, and Domenica, maybe we can put a link to the Mensarius Oath in the chat here. It's an ethical code of conduct for venture capitalists and other finance professionals that's designed to foster positive outcomes for society and the planet. Okay, so VC Lab, we're a mission-driven company. We exist because we think that the only solution to solving some of today's largest problems is through venture capital, because it's through capital that we're going to be, and the decision makers of where capital is going to be allocated is the only thing that can change the course of kind of the direction in which we're kind of headed. So in order to take part in VC Lab, the last step in your application process, so once we've reviewed everything and we think that you're a good fit and stuff like that, we're going to email you and we're going to say, hey, you're accepted into the program. Congratulations. We think you have what it takes. Please endorse the Mensarius Oath. And you just can't get on the program if you don't, kind of align with the values of the Mensarius Oath. Again, putting this in the chat. We're trying to build a very kind of ethical community here, and a community that really aligns on values. So, every single person that joins the community, we just need to make sure that we align on the values. And yeah, and that's how we're going to be creating a better future. So once again, just to kind of recap here, VC Lab Cohort 18, the theme is beautiful. Future, the early deadline is on April 14th. The start date of the program is on May 14th. and the start date and the end date, I'm really sorry, there's a typo there. The end date of the program is going to be around October 1st. So let's dive into this early deadline here just for a second, right? So there's an early deadline and there's a final deadline, which is going to be kind of like a few weeks prior to May 14th. We encourage everyone here to apply before the early deadline coming up. There's a few reasons why. The first one is because the cohort fills up. There's such a huge amount of applications, and there's only a limited amount of resource that we have as a VC lab team to allocate to these participants. We want to make sure that everyone has a really good experience here with us and actually comes on the program and gets a lot of value from it, which means that they are then successful in launching the funds. And the cohort fills up quickly. So if you apply by the early deadline, you have a lot more chances in getting into the cohort. And there's a few other benefits. So, what we're going to do is that those who apply before the early deadline and get confirmed, so that means you need to be kind of like we're going to be in communication with you. We're going to take you through the kind of various steps that are needed to confirm and to finalize your enrollment in the program. But if you do everything before the early deadline, so remember, this means you need to submit your application before the early deadline, because then we're going to be getting in contact with you. We might ask you to interview. We're going to see if you endorse them and Sarah's oath. So this is going to take a little bit of time, right? So make sure that you put in an application as soon as possible, everyone. And then we're going to get in touch with you. We're going to tell you what the next steps are. You might have an interview once again. But if you complete the entire process before the early deadline, you're going to get access to our Slack community. So this is the entire VC Lab community Slack. There's 1,000 emerging VCs in there who are successfully kind of running their own venture capital funds. You're going to get into your cohort 18 Slack channel so you can start networking with each other and kind of creating this community. We're going to have early bird live sessions. So anyone who's kind of applied by the early deadline, we know you're really serious about launching the fund. And so we're kind of technically going to start the program before this May 14 deadline with those of you who apply before the early deadline. So we're going to already start having a few sessions and kind of giving you a bit of a head start above everyone else. We're going to give you access to a suite of AI tools that we've built to help you kind of launch your fund, think about your thesis, find LPs. It's all, guys, there's so much that's done on AI right now. It's crazy. And we're building all of these tools for you to do that. And so you're going to have access to all of that. And we're going to be organizing some pre-program socials too. So kind of networking events where you can start meeting other people in the cohort. So make sure that you apply before the early deadline, get an application. Again, the application can take up to 15 minutes. So make sure that, if you want to do this, just put in an application today, guys. Don't leave it last minute. And then we can start working with you a lot, faster. So we've covered a lot of ground. And so now I want to open it up to Q&A. All right, everyone. So, by the way, make sure that you upvote the questions in the Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah, make sure you're upvoting the questions in the Q&A because we won't have time to go maybe through all the questions if there's a lot of them. So I want to make sure that we prioritize the questions that you want to see answered. So let's go through these. All right. So I'm going to show these on stage. Niluka is asking, do we need to have proven record of returns? What if we have no experience in the space? So Niluka, yeah, this is a very common question that we have, and thank you for the question. Thanks for being here too, Niluka. So you don't need to have an investment track record. It's not a requirement. We've worked with a lot of people who have started funds who didn't have an investment track record. So I know I use that as an example, and it's obviously beneficial if you have an investment track record, especially if you've been successful at generating returns or markups in your investment track record, but it's not a necessity. So we've seen people succeed who have other strengths, and you need to take it back to what do you think is going to be appealing for LPs. LPs are interested in, do you have a good network of deals that you can access? So maybe you have started your own community in the space that you're looking to start a fund in. Maybe you run an accelerator. Maybe it's like a WhatsApp group of all these founders. Um, Maybe it's, you're just kind of going to all the events. I mean, I don't know, it could be anything. But you have access to deals, right? So that could be something that's interesting to LPs. The other thing that could be interesting is kind of, you're someone who, once you start getting involved with startups, you help them grow because you're sitting on the board, because you're an advisor, because you have your own accelerator, because whatever. But like, once they start getting involved with you, their valuation starts rising. They start closing larger and larger rounds at higher and higher valuations. And so that's a type of track record too. It's called an advisory track record. So maybe that this is something that you have. So, Niluka, I hope that makes sense. But guys, if there's any other questions, do let me know. So awesome. This one's answered. Next up, we have Anurag's question. How is Venture Institute different from Venture Labs? So, okay, there is a little bit of confusion here. So VC Lab is part of Decel Group, which is our parent company. But all of this spun out of Founder Institute, who run Venture Labs. Founder Institute and Decel Group, which owns VC Lab, are two completely separate and independent company. The link between them is that our CEO and co-founder, Adeo Resi, has also founded FI, but he's now full-time in Decel Group and just kind of an advisor, board member, and chairman maybe at FI. But we're two very different companies. You will see, however, that there are a few similarities between the two companies because the founder was the same, and we're a spin out essentially of FI. The Venture Labs is an FI program, and to be honest with you, I don't know a lot about this program. And Venture Institute is one of a VC Lab program. So what we talked about today was the VC Lab kind of accelerator for new and emerging managers looking to close on a fund. Venture Institute is another program that we have, and maybe Domenica, we can put the link to Venture Institute in the chat. It's a learning program. So if you're kind of just wanting to learn about venture capital, you want to maybe get some experience working at a VC firm, then apply to Venture Institute if you just want to learn. It's a great program. We offer hands-on experience to the top candidates who get to work in real VC funds. So it's a great program. So Venture Institute learning program run by VC Lab, Decel Group. Venture Labs, completely different program that I don't know anything about, run by FI. All right. Question by EPEG. What if at the start of the journey, I don't have that edge just yet? So this is kind of, I can't really answer that for you. I will say though, that sometimes you have an edge and you just don't know that you've had an edge, right? Um, we're going to be looking at these kind of signs in your application. Once again, remember what LPs want to see. They want to see, do you have access to good deals? Can you pick the winners? And can you help these companies grow once you start getting involved in them? So kind of have a think about these things, see what you have. And what I would say, EPEC, is submit an application because we're quite good at kind of like untangling these things and weaving them out, of your application. Or if we kind of invite you to an interview, we'll be able to kind of assess this for ourselves and we'll let you know. So I encourage you to apply. All right. Peter, is asking, interested in understanding the VC Lab business model, how much of our carry-on fee will be paid to VC Labs? Great question, Peter. Thank you for asking. So the program VC Lab is completely free. There is no upfront or there's no any kind of fee that is required for you to participate in the program. And there's no equity split or carry or anything like that that you need to kind of pay for participating in the program. There is a way to, so VC Lab is kind of like a program, a cohort experience. So once again, it's a large cohort. There's going to be over 300 of you guys. There's one thing that we do is that there's like a premium way to participate in VC Lab, which basically just kind of gives you more one-to-one time with the mentors. Because if you go through the cohort, then it's, group sessions, group office hours, group everything. And there's just kind of like so much resource that we can give to everyone. But if you want to do like a premium, if you want to have that premium experience, then you have kind of weekly one-to-one office hours with the experts. You have your own Slack channel. You are getting all the kind of feedback on your material and stuff like that. So we can put a link to that in the chat as well, Domenica, about like the premium VC Lab programs. But we barely make any money of this. How VC Lab actually makes no money, but remember we're under the Decel Group umbrella. And at Decel Group, the main source of revenue, and it's kind of what is subsidizing, if you like, these programs, is fund formation, fund admin, kind of partner work that we do with some of the funds that go through the VC Lab program. So once again, our you know mission is to democratize access to venture capital because we think that's how we're going to solve the issue. So we're aligned, and everything that we do, we align our success to yours, because we think that if you don't win as VCs, we don't win as a company. And our business model is exactly the same. And so that means that we won't, for fund formation and fund back office services, that we give to some people in the community, we will actually not let you hire us as your back office provider if we don't think that you're ready, because we don't want you paying these fees, which can be quite high. If you like form a fund and stuff like that, you set up the legal entities, can be really high. And we think that because we know how difficult it is to succeed in this space, we're not going to take anyone's money if we don't think that they can succeed. Right. And so that's our business model. We work with some people who go in the VC Lab program who choose us as their provider and who we think are going to win. So hopefully that makes sense. Peter, thank you for asking the question. Gabrielle is asking, does VC Lab have experience supporting funds that operate with a mix of public and private capital, such as those leveraging government-backed initiatives alongside private investments? So yeah, are you referring to just like, I don't know where you're based in Chile. So just kind of like government fund to fund investing in new and emerging fund managers. Maybe that's what you're referring to. So yeah, we support you. We just kind of have strong views about whether or not you should be accepting kind of these government funds into your into your firm, because the reality is that these you know f- funders, they're government backed. And so what it means is that there's a whole lot of reporting that you need to do to these funders, and it's going to slow you down massively as a firm manager. And you're not, there's like a lot of strings attached. There's a lot of things that you can't do as well. There's like certain conditions as to the types of companies you can and cannot invest in. And so what we're trying to get you to do, again, like if you win, we win. And the people who tend to win in this space in venture capital, regardless of where you are in the world, are the people who can move the fastest and make the best decisions, not make decisions that are kind of like restricted within the bounds of like the people who, or organizations that have invested in your fund. And so you think about kind of startups, you want to be agile as like a new and emerging fund manager. You want to be able to invest anywhere you like. The industry is moving at incredible paces right now. You're competing with AI kind of VCs. So you don't want to be bound by these kind of like reports that you need to be filing for these government funds. So and the other thing is that they just kind of take so long to come into your fund that by the time you close them, your peers who would have started at the same time, they've already closed the entire fund and they've already started deploying capital and raising their second fund. So if you kind of look at it from kind of like a where so you're all starting at the same place, where you all are in 10 years from now, while you may have started with a larger fund one because you got this like government fund to back you, and maybe you started with a $50 million fund, just making things up here, and then your peers just kind of went with something a little bit smaller, a bit more manageable at 10 million. If you actually look 10 years down the line, those folks that started more nimble at 10 million just have so much more AUM, so assets under management in 10 years, because they've been able to move so much faster, make better investments, create better returns, therefore attracting more capital. Therefore, you know what I mean? So the flywheel just kind of takes off at that point. So that's our kind of view here. But yes, we will support you if you're really, set on raising money from these types of funders. All right. Let's see here. Dharmesh, thank you for your question. Can we participate more than one member as one team for a given company? Yeah, absolutely. If you have kind of a co-GP or co-managing partner that you're setting up this fund with, you should both apply to the program, because what's going to happen is that if you're multiple people in the team, you're looking at the strongest member of the team. And if you have a really strong one person, then that's going to drive your application up. Whereas if you apply and let's say, I mean, I don't know your background, but maybe you don't have a very strong background for whatever reason, but you have a partner who hasn't applied that's kind of like really legit, and they don't apply, then you might be declined because we don't know that you have this like really legit partner. So everyone should apply, and what we do is that we assess you guys as a team. So make sure all your co-managing partners and general partners apply to the program as well. And you'll both participate in the program too. All right. Gabriel is asking, what kind of support does VC Lab offer in helping funds establish and strengthen strategic partnerships with key industry players? I think that this is kind of broad. I don't know who you mean with key industry players. Um, your key industry players at the initial stages are limited partners. And so we're going to help you identify those limited partners in your first and second degree networks, and kind of um, give you the guidance that you need in order to convert any conversation or touch points you have with them into commitments for your fund. So hopefully that answers the question. But if you meant something else, do submit another answer, Gabriel. Thank you. All right. Gabriel, does VC Lab have any programs that provide direct funding? So we have a fund of funds called Decel Capital within Decel Group that does invest in new and emerging fund managers, most of which have come out of the program. And so, yeah, this is kind of an opportunity, but we'd need to kind of see how you do throughout the program, right? So hopefully that's clear. Can one apply for two programs at the same time, for instance, Venture Institute and VC Lab cohorts? Or yeah, yeah, you can apply to both programs, but sometimes you won't be able to participate in both. So, for example, you won't be if you're doing VC Lab, you probably shouldn't be doing any other program because the time requirement of launching a fund is so big. So I would say if you're doing VC Lab, don't apply to another program. If you're doing Venture Institute or LP Institute, they're a little bit easier from a time commitment standpoint so you could juggle like a second program. Thank you, Ashish, for your question. All right, everyone. Um, Unfortunately, I can't take any more questions, but what we're going to do now is that, and thank you so much, by the way, for being here. I hope this was useful, right? So, what we're going to be doing now is that I'm going to stop kind of this main stage introduction, and you're going to see that there's networking tables and there's also an admissions table. On the admissions table, you will find a member of our team who runs, a large kind of part of our admissions here at VC Lab. And her name is Emily, and you can ask her any questions you want about kind of applying to the program, or if you have a question about where your application is at, then you can ask her there. So with that, everyone, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to kind of see you all here and interact with you. Hopefully this provides a lot of kind of guidance for those of you who are interested in applying. And remember to apply before the early deadline if you can. With that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and hopefully we'll be working together very soon. Goodbye.